Hello and welcome. I'm joined today by Martin Barnes, VP of Global Assistance, to discuss how SPS and Concentric work together to deliver integrated, intelligence-led protection for clients across the globe. We'll be exploring how active monitoring, online sentiment analysis and travel risk assessments combine to mitigate risks such as kidnap for ransom, piracy, cyber extortion and fixated threats, and how the intelligence and operations teams collaborate to stay ahead of evolving risks in both physical and digital environments. Martin, thank you for joining us today. If we may start by discussing kidnap and ransom, the traditional method of kidnapping, is it still as prevalent today as it was over the years?
It really depends where you look in the world, if I'm honest with you. So if we look in sort of South Africa as an instant, kidnap is as prevalent there now, probably more prevalent than it's ever been before. Whereas if we look to more traditional places that we used to see kidnapping, such as Colombia, we've definitely seen a sort of a downtake in what I'd call traditional kidnappings, where people are taken, held for a long period of time, and then a long and negotiated settlement is made for the ransom. That's kind of been replaced with either express kidnapping or virtual kidnapping, and there's lots of different reasons for that, but one of the main reasons is just criminal groups evolve and technology evolves, and as they get younger, they realise that there's much less risk in a virtual or express kidnapping than there is in a traditional kidnapping. The rewards are not the same, but actually you can carry it out in a higher frequency, which means you get the rewards in the end without doing the one take.
It must be very difficult, though, for security analysts to engage with express kidnappings. I mean, by the very nature of the fact that it's an express kidnapping, it's over just after it's begun. And so oftentimes you'll find the victims are reporting to you after the fact.
Yeah, and that's something that we see quite often now. And we not only see it in express kidnappings, but we also see it in the other element of kidnapping that seems to become prevalent at the moment, crypto kidnapping. And there is a terminology called hot wallets. So if you've got a hot wallet, it means that somebody can actually take that money. Only you can authorise the money going out, but you don't need any other authorisation. And that's a crypto sort of terminology. But if you just think about our everyday personal lives, we all got a hot wallet because on our phone, we've all got a banking app that we can all get into and we can all transfer money. Now, how much money you have in that banking app is going to be different to each people. But actually, we all carry that hot wallet, so we're all potential victims of this kidnapping phenomenon.
So what can we do then to...
It's all about mitigation. You've got to plan and you've got to understand. So if you just think about it from, if you are a traveller, every time we travel, we go through what we call as security expert choke points. And those choke points are the obvious ones. So they're going to be the airport. So when you arrive at the airport, you're going to look out of place, yeah? So part of the mitigation strategies that we try to put in on travellers is trying to give them some idea about what the airport looks like, where to go to, what happens if you've got a secure driver and that person isn't there, where do you default back to? And it's all that planning and preparation that can stop you becoming a victim, because nothing would be worse than just going out through the airport, and I think probably everybody watching this has experienced it, where you've travelled for holiday or leisure purposes and you come outside the airport and somebody offers you a taxi, and because you're not a local and you don't really understand it, you kind of almost go on trust.
We're also very vulnerable at that point.
Oh, hugely, yeah.
Post-flight, tired,
yeah.
in a foreign country, possibly not speaking the language.
And opportunist criminals will use those choke points. So yeah, that is a perfect one. Taxis is another one, so we all need to take some form of transport. So is the taxi or the ride share you're getting in, is that real? How do you know that's real? If you've been directed by somebody who may look even as they're a member of staff, you know, put a high-vis jacket on, who argues with somebody in a high-vis jacket and steers you towards taxi? So all of these things are choke points and triggers that we just follow naturally when we arrive somewhere. And what we try to do is try to talk to clients about that and just give them some preparations, some plans around how to avoid those choke points and mistakes. And then we'll talk about, if you are unfortunate enough to be the victim of this express kidnapping, normally they happen very, very quickly. So you might be ushered into a taxi and then all of a sudden a significant threat of violence is made against you, or they'll pull a firearm or they'll pull a knife, yeah? So obviously we don't want anybody to resist that. You know, compliance is always going to be your best option in those circumstances. But if you can restrict how much money you've actually got and how much money you can give over at the minute, you limit some of the damage to yourself as well. What we wouldn't say is actively resist that person and don't give them the money because you're in a difficult situation. So there's lots of steps you can go through. There's lots of technological things that you can do on your mobile phones and that can hide apps. You can offset your apps when you're going through and then reintroduce them once you're safely in your hotel. But your hotel, again, is another choke point. So if I'm an opportunist criminal and I'm looking for people to target, I'm going to start targeting the hotel.
As has happened historically in recent history too.
Yeah.
It's a couple of sports people and some well-known DJs, I think, as well.
Yeah, we see it, on a regular basis. If you once we've had a case, and you mentioned express kidnapping, but it doesn't really matter if it's express kidnapping, So we respond, as you know, exclusively for travellers, and the special risk insurance covers everything from your traditional kidnap and ransom, but all the way through to things like missing persons, disappearance, homicides, extortion, cyber extortion. So I often see a number of cases sort of come across my desk every year, but when you unpick those and analyse them and look at them, the actual threat or the actual incident has always happened at a choke point. It's always happened somewhere, and that may be, the route that you're travelling to a certain location, you've travelled it more than twice, so you've been surveilled, and then the third time that you travel it, there's a roadblock and you are taken. And, so that mitigation advice that we can offer, and that is all around a holistic approach to whatever travel you're going to do. And there's some major things happening in the world this year where people will be travelling to. You really need to think about, how am I going to travel? What am I going to do when I get there? And especially, what do I do if it goes wrong? And another great example of that outside of criminality is, if you're travelling to a country which has a huge natural disaster, as we all know, the countries, and we've seen it very recently on the news with the flooding and the earthquakes, countries' own infrastructure is overwhelmed immediately. And we, as foreign travellers, are not going to get any preferential treatment. So it's really important that you've got the right mechanism and framework behind you if you are unlucky enough to be caught in one of those events. And again, SPS specialises in providing that global assistance across to all our clients, both in the medical and the security format.
Can we turn our attention to piracy now? Because here is a threat that you don't hear so much about these days. So maybe forgiven for thinking that it's disappeared. That's not the case at all, and you have experience of that.
Yeah, I think there's a number of different circumstances that have happened in the last year. So I think a lot of the conflict in the Middle East has really taken a lot of our attention, and it's also taken the attention of a lot of the security forces who technically have policed the seas. So if you imagine the seas as your high street, the Navy, whether it be from the UN or whether it be from sort of African nations, the Navy act as the police, the vessel support. And I think some of those resources have been diverted elsewhere. And I think also because of some of the stuff that's going in the Middle East, the shipping routes have changed as well. So as the shipping routes have changed and more traffic is going through, Straits of Singapore springs to mind straight away. As more shipping traffic goes through the Straits of Singapore, we're going to see an increase in piracy. I don't think we're at the kind of the days of the Somalian pirates coming out in the skiffs, but we're certainly seeing a number of boardings. And from those boardings, especially in Africa, we've seen a number of kidnaps. So not only have we got the piracy incidents dealt with, but we've seen the crews taken ashore, and then we've obviously responded to the kidnap and ransom situation of the crew.
In a worrying way, it's like the criminals are also checking out globally where the hotspots are, where the vulnerability lies, and where the most opportunities are too.
I think in life, well, one of the biggest underestimates you can ever make is that criminals don't react to what's in front of them. So criminals are really ingenious. So when you think, of cyber, for example, when cyber fraud first started up, it was kind of really rudimentary. It was on an email and somebody had, inherited $1 million, and if you sent them a bit of money, you get it back. And it was very, very basic. Whereas if you look at some of the actual cyber attacks that happen now, some of the phishing stuff that goes on your phones, some of the fake emails that are sent, some of these things that demand immediate payment, the sophistication is massive. And that's all because the criminals just evolve, and they will always look for opportunities. So we talked earlier on about choke points. I think at choke points you have almost like 3 levels of criminality at every choke point. You're going to have what I'd call a low-level criminal who's just going to take the opportunity. So sees you come through, you may look like you've got a bit of worth, they're going to try and exploit you a little bit. Then you're going to have a sort of an organised group that use that's their turf, and they're a little bit more organised. So you'll have 2 or 3 people involved in it, ushering you into a taxi, and they'll own the taxi, and then everything goes downhill from there. And then oversight of that, especially we see this in LATAM with the cartels, you're going to have an organised criminal network. But that's not necessarily just in LATAM. If you look in the UK, we have a number of organised criminal networks. Ireland have a number of organised criminal networks. Europe is awash with them, especially in France. So there is always going to be this overarching, and what we have got to counter, and what we've got to get our clients in step with is, it's not just the low-level criminality. You could be targeted, simply for your profile, your company's profile, the perceived wealth, by a really organised group. And if you're taken by an organised group, they are going to be prepared, and they will act in a way that's appropriate. And we see different levels of violence. So that's a pressure point that the organisation will put on us to do what they want to do, and we just have to manage our way through that.
Martin, speaking of targeting individuals, fixated threats are on the increase, and it's no surprise really, because we give so much of ourselves out to the public domain, either knowingly or unknowingly. So we have our social media platforms where so many people are very active on social media, giving all sorts of details about their lives now. But likewise, if companies are victims of phishing or scam accounts, there may be a data breach, and your address, your phone number, etc., might be out there in public domain too. So this obviously isn't helpful when you're talking about fixated threats.
No, fixated threat is, I think fixated threat has always been around, but I do think it's become much more prevalent.
Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely right in what you're saying, is that we share so much of our lives now online, that there is a mental health element around fixated threat, which I think is important to recognise. But if you are a fixated person and you become fixated with somebody online, you almost, they genuinely believe that they are either in a relationship or in a communication relationship with that individual.
So this is personally speaking, for those personal,
So from the threat actor's point of view, they genuinely believe that they are in a relationship, or they have a relationship with the individual. And the problem that causes is because we share so much information, they feel they know us much more. Whereas, if you rewind sort of 20 years ago, yes, we had celebrities, but you'd never be able to find in an instant where that celebrity lived, who they're married to, what their children are called,
or what they did that morning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you go online now, you can find that all. It's a sort of the click of a button. And I think for somebody who is fixated, that becomes real in a very strange way, and a very worrying way. So we support travellers in their fixated threat policy, and that is definitely one aspect of it, where it is that kind of historic, what we all read in the kind of the headlines as stalking behaviour. And generally we become involved in that when the problem has got to a certain point that they feel that they need to do it. So I read some really interesting articles around stalking, and most people don't report it to about the 100th incident. So there's been 100 incidents that have happened before people actually report.
Incredibly upsetting for the victims.
Oh, hugely. And I think there is a slight reluctance from the victims as well to report it, and that may be the way that it's perceived by law enforcement, the way that's perceived by media, what damage it might do to their online presence.
Or to the other person, if
exactly.
they're known to them.
Yeah, indeed. So I think that's a really difficult thing. But the strange phenomenon we've seen in fixated threat is that is also moved across into
the corporate world, really.
Yeah, it's a perception of injustice against a corporate entity or a politician, which that person may or may not have had any contact with whatsoever. Okay. But because of either a stream on social media or something has got their attention about that, they become, because it's within their sort of biological sort of setup to become fixated about something, they become fixated about that particular incident. And again, that's a really difficult thing to mitigate or deflect them away from. So we have a specialised team that is a fixated threat team, and we work alongside some specialised partners in the mental health services And it really is about what we call a prime solution. So it's problem resolution in a multi-agency environment. And I don't think anybody can do it alone, but we are an integral part of that.
And so moving into 2026, what are you hoping that clients and potential clients are most mindful of? Because there's so much to remember. We only barely touched on 3 topics there. There's so much more involved in terms of personal safety, public safety, and safety in the workplace too.
Yeah, I'd encourage all clients I think the end of the year is always a time where we reflect on the previous year, and I think it's a really good point to look forward for the next year. So I would encourage everybody to look at their security posture, think about what their security plans look like, think about what their travel risk plans look like, think about what their cyber and digital health looks like, think about whether they need kidnap and ransom services or other crisis management services. Medical is a huge part that we always forget. So we always think about security issues in terms of preservation of life and life threatening, but probably more people will encounter some form of medical injury or injury when traveling than anything else. So that's a really important element that people can do. And at SPS, we specialize in that holistic approach for our customers. So rather than on a kind of an off-the-shelf kind of, this fits you, we'd actually like to sit down, work out with the client exactly what they need and where they go with that. And we have various products, from insurance-based products to a global assistance product, which has 3 sort of tailored layers for clients, which can range from speaking to our GRC, which is really the hub of SPS, which is as you know, we've spoken before, it's staffed by ex-UK Special Forces personnel, law enforcement and intelligence. So if you're ringing in a crisis, you're actually getting somebody who can give you that immediate advice. We also have specialist medics and doctors on hand as well, so we can give immediate medical advice as well. And that's really the start of the process when you need, when you have a problem. But what we'd like people to do in 2026 is to actually anticipate what that problem might be. Look at the geography you might be travelling in, look at the demographics where you're going, have a mind of the geopolitical situation. And again, this is where being part of the concentric group, that whole holistic intelligence package. So if somebody can provide me with actionable intelligence before I go somewhere, it gives me an opportunity to adjust my posture before I arrive.
Of course, it'd be wonderful to take it. Crazy not to.
Yeah, exactly.
Martin, thank you so much for joining us today. So much information to digest, and I'm sure people would like to read more. If that's the case, where should they go?
So I'll direct them to our website at sps-global.com, which has got a wealth of information, including our intelligence platforms, our crisis management, our medical, and the sort of latest news and stuff where we're operating. It's also got a direct function for Contact Us.
Many thanks for joining us today, Martin. It really is clear that the strength of this partnership lies in the seamless connection between intelligence and operation, turning insight into action to keep our clients secure worldwide. And it's a perfect example of how SPS and Concentric work together to anticipate and manage complex risks for our clients wherever they operate.